that. You know, this is fun, working in the light, but I would look, I can't, my eyes in the back of my head don't work so good, just like the ones in front, but nevertheless. Anyway, just so, we'll make this work. All right. Good evening, afternoon, sorry. See, I've already messed up. It's afternoon. Well, that's all right. You know, I was a little apprehensive about tonight, and you know it's not, because I'll be teaching. I mean, I do that all the time, and it's not getting up in front of you people, because I do that all that time, and I rather enjoy it, quite honestly. But it's the fact that when I have to talk and think and use electrical commodities at the same time, there's always something goes wrong. And on top of that, I'm chewing gum, just like let you know. Anyway, tonight, the word of the week was church. I'm sure if you looked that up, it even tells you that in the bulletin. But what we're going to do tonight is we're going to take a look at a specific look at the church. I mean, everything that's in there, you can read that. You're supposed to read it this week anyway. So, and you'll find out what that's all about. But what Jeff wanted to do tonight is he wanted to concentrate on the fact that the benefits a small church has. And that's what we're going to do, because we're going to discuss how we can be effective as a small congregation. Now, according to definition, these are some statistics he has down here. Obviously, some are large, number in the thousands, even tens of thousands, which I can't imagine that, but I guess it probably happens. Some are small, with as few as 2 or more people meeting in a home, which you know that too, all right? The definition, he says, of church size is rather arbitrary, but here's one. A small church is considered less than 200 members, so I guess that makes us a small congregation, which you probably figured that, right? Which happens to be 80% of churches. Okay, so that's just a statistic, you know, for whatever that's worth. A medium church has 201 to 400 members, at least what it says here, and that's 10% of congregations. A large church has 400 plus, which is the other 10%. So if you add 80, 10, and 10, you come up with 100 and 100. All right. Each size, Bruce taught me. That's Bruce math. Anyway, each size has its advantages. There are things a large church can do that a small church can't, because it has greater resources. Okay, it can reach farther, spend more money on stuff and programs, and you know, spread itself out in a lot of different ways. But, and there's a but, there are benefits of small churches that are often lost in the concept of a larger church. And that's what we're going to talk about today. All right. And this is where well, I don't know if I can find it. There it is. Okay, right click. Let's see, I've got left, we got right. Okay, we're on this. Oh, look at that. It worked. All right. Here's what we have. It says, like a branch, that's a good thing about wearing a mic. See, you can wander, and I like to wander. Like a branch that grows because of its connection to the tree, we thrive when we stay connected to the church. Somebody explain that to me. What's that mean to you? Anyone? A whole bunch of you. I don't care. Just speak up.
Well, a branch relies...
Okay, you're done. Next. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Steve. Oh, you weren't done yet. All right. I'm sorry. I got to get into this. Sorry.
What?
There I go. Right down the drain. All right. Go ahead, Steve. I'm sorry.
Well, like a branch is connected to the tree, it's nourishment in its growth. So are we connected.
I can't.
Are you curling mower there?
Well, I got a little bit of each. I'm sorry. Obviously, I'm not. Go ahead. Oh, that sounded good. What was it again?
Well, like a branch is connected to a tree for it to survive, because that's where the nourishment comes from. So we are the church, we too can survive as well.
What else want to add to that? Make sense? Does make sense. So what happens when you are disconnected? Let's look at the other side. What happens? Oh, Terry.
You're like the leaves that fall off the tree. They blow away.
Blow away, or they stay on your yard and you have to rake them up, right? One of
Yeah.
the two, yes. Okay. Garrett?
It's always similar to the analogy Jeff always gives out at camp, where instead of a branch of the tree, he always uses the analogy of coal in a fire, where if the coal comes away from the fire too long, burns out and dies, and it loses what it had. But if it goes back to the fire, it's going to thrive and make it even bigger and help out in more ways than one.
Yeah, that is good. Yeah, but yeah, that's right. That's exactly what happens. I have, or I should say, my neighbor has a couple willow trees. I don't know what you know about willow trees, but I can tell you this, they are messy rascals, okay? Now, because they belong to her, I can't just cut them down. If I had my choice, I would. But here's the thing, it comes down one branch at a time. And guess where it comes down? It doesn't come down her yard, it comes down my yard. So, if you look out my back window today, you look out of my backyard, what do you suppose you see? You see a whole winter's full of branches laying all over. It's a mess. I spend at least a week every spring cleaning up that yard from that willow tree. Are these branches alive? No, they're not. They're dead. They get picked up, they get thrown away, whatever. But they're of no use. Christians who don't hang on to the tree, don't hang on to the source of nourishment and encouragement, also do the same thing. They die, exactly. So, and by the way, if anybody wants to make a few bucks, you can come and pick up some branches, okay? All right. Usually that becomes a job I offer my grandkids, and they suck it right up. It's good. All right. Let's go to, well, let's see, what do we have next? There we go. 1 Timothy 3:15 and 16. Somebody read that, please. I don't care who. Anyone? You can either use your own version or read that. It doesn't make any difference to me. Now, if you're like me, you're sitting in the back row, I can't read that anyhow. So I got to look it up, okay? Now, I can see it today, but then I'm standing up front. Makes a difference, you see. 1 Timothy 3:15, 16, and read 14 while you're at it. If you've looked it up. Who has that? Anyone? Okay. Karen?
These things I write to you, though I hope to come to you shortly. But if I am delayed, I write so that you may know how you ought to conduct yourself in the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and the ground of the truth. And without controversy, great is the mystery of godliness. God was manifested in the flesh, justified in the spirit, seen by angels, preached among the Gentiles, believed on in the world, received up in glory.
Okay. That's some good stuff right there, I'm telling you. The reason I had you read 14 is because he's telling you the reason that he's writing the letter. He's writing the letter because he wants to come to them. He wants to come and visit them, but he's detained at the time. So, now, what happens tonight is I have Jeff's notes, and we're going to go over his notes. Now, this is one section where I have my own addendum. I have my own thought in here, and then we'll go to what Jeff has to say. But here's how I look at this, because he told me when you do this, he said, well, first of all, you don't have to do it at all. I said, well, I'll do it. He says, you can do whatever you want. So I looked at what he had, and I thought, well, this sounds pretty good. So that's why we're going with that. Now in this, what happens in 1 Timothy here, what happens just before these verses? What's going on? That's right. Talking about elders and deacons, giving them qualifications, saying what they should be like, what they should be doing, all this and that. Okay, what happens immediately after this? I'm looking at context here. because I'm a very big on context. I know Jeff is, I know Bruce is. Look before, look after, figure it all out, okay? What happens? Yes?
Right after, in the next chapter, he's talking about falling away and leaving the truth, leaving the faith.
Right, exactly. So you have opposite ends of the spectrum, don't we? We have what's expected. I got turned down, didn't I?
Just a little bit.
Was I reverberating? I thought maybe I was. Okay, thank you, Garrett. If you can't hear me, just raise your hand. And I don't know what I'll do. Probably nothing, really. I'll just keep going. But I might speak louder. Oh, yeah, I'm just kidding. Anyway, so, all right. So you have elders, deacons, and after that, you have apostasy. You have people that are preaching doctrines and stuff that are not according to what God wants. In the middle here, we have these verses. What is the connection between these verses and the two ends of the spectrum? Now, this is where you got to put a thinking cap on. But this is Ron. This is what Ron looks at when he looks at something. He says, look before, look after. This is not in the middle for no reason. He has a reason for doing this. What do you think it is?
He's reminding him who Jesus is. That he was,
Pardon me?
like, he's reminding him who Jesus was. You know, that we've talked about all these things, but don't forget your foundation is that God was manifested in the flesh and justified by the Spirit. You know, he's putting all the bullet points of what Jesus did.
Yeah. It actually is, he has a lot of things in that verse, doesn't he? Really, he covers a lot of area in that verse as to what Jesus was, who he did, or what he did, you know, and what they were supposed to do, and what happened to him by the fact that he was raised. All that. He covers it all in verse 16, really. But he starts out by saying that he wants them to know how to conduct themselves. Okay? So how does our conduct figure into all this? What's he trying to tell us, do you think? This is Paul writing, of course, Timothy. Anybody make any sense out of that? It's actually quite simple, at least as far as I'm concerned. He's telling them, that's what we basically have just been talking about, that he's telling them how to conduct themselves because of what they are part of, which is the church, which is all the things that you find in verse 16. You should conduct yourself in a good manner for that reason. So, you go from the elders and deacons, the qualifications and all the things that tell us how we should act, all the way to the other end where it says, but there are those, and it's a warning, there are those who will not conduct themselves properly, who will extend beyond what people, will extend beyond what Jesus wants them to know, and what they should be standing for, and how they should be acting, and so on and so forth. Those are the people that would be cut off. See? All right. Any comment? Anybody see that? I just threw that in. See, that's what happens when I read something and somebody says, you come up with something. That's right. Okay. Now this is where Jeff goes, I think. Or not. Oh, there it is. The church is important because it reveals Christ. We already talked about that, didn't we? Even as Christ reveals God. So it's a trade-off. The church reveals Christ, but it also reveals God. In other words, if you see one, you see them both. Isn't that kind of a common concept? Where you really don't separate the two, where you see one, you see the other? Okay? And that's one of the reasons it's very important, because it allows us to see that connection between Jesus and God. And of course, we are an extension of that. We are a branch off that tree. Simple, right? Reveals God in human flesh. Reveals Christ to the world. Oh, this is fun. I like this. Yeah. I don't know what I was worried about. Anyway, reveals Christ to the world, which of course is that which is our connection to this. This is what we do. It's our job to take this Jesus and take him out into the world and teach him to other people, right? And make more, you know? You're not satisfied with what you have, you make more, all right? Christians, in other words, all right? Why is the church important? The church is the current expression of Jesus Christ in the world until he comes. Okay? Any comments on that? Make sense? Oh, I'm sorry. My side vision doesn't work so well either, apparently.
I was just thinking about the concept. To me, it's really sobering, what Kate brought up about how we're representing, what we're representing, why we're connected to the church. And then what you brought up about we're revealing Christ to the world. And I knew that, of course, but I just started thinking about a family and how with a physical family, if they're working against each other instead of with each other, we call that a dysfunctional family. And we can have a dysfunctional church. And if that's what we're revealing to the world, that's not a very pretty picture.
Right.
And so it just made me think of the importance, again, of unity.
Exactly. Good point. Anyone care to expound upon that thought? And that's a good thought. Garrett?
I know this was said before, but I always, this saying, a house divided can't stand. And I remember reading about that back in like elementary school, middle school, when I was doing a project on Abe Lincoln when he said that.
Mm-hmm.
And
He's not the first one to say that.
that's why I said it's been said before. But that's who I always think of when I.
He
when I
borrowed
think
that
of
one. Yeah.
He definitely did. But
did.
that goes along exactly with what Crystal was saying, where if you're not united, if you're not putting aside the small differences that are constantly coming up, if you're not getting along with, your fellow Christians of the church, it can't stand. It won't last. It's not going to stay whole and work as a unit as it should.
That's right. Steve?
I think it's 1 Corinthians 12 talks about comparing the physical body to the church.
Mm-hmm.
And as Christ is the head, and we're the individual members of that body, if you think of the human body, when the human body doesn't respond or isn't connected to the head, they're handicapped. And that same principle applies today. If we go off into our own ways because we think we're doing right, irrespective of the head, handicap occurs.
And that's exactly why in 1 Timothy, where we were reading, where the after part of that talks about the apostasy and somebody coming in with a different idea and drawing people away, and that's exactly what happens. When you draw people astray, they become the branches that end up in my yard. Then you got to go. All right? Hal?
Just a thought, but this phenomenon of large versus small churches is really relatively new in the entire history of the church. And I believe it has as much to do with the way we live and our infrastructure and as it does anything else. If we look at Paul, he went to all these different towns and villages and established churches in all of those. And if you think about it, those people traveled from their homes to church, usually either walking or on a donkey or an animal or something, within an hour. Yeah. And up until 100 years ago, you couldn't go more than 10 or 15 miles in an hour. And yet 100 years ago, we got cars. And now we see people going to church 45 to 50 miles from where they live, and that's still an hour's drive, and not that much has changed. We just happen to live in an area, if you look, there used to be a church in Dixon, there used to be a church in Clinton, and those have consolidated into some of the other congregations around them, and yet they're all within an hour of where most of the people in that congregation live.
Interesting, interesting. And you're right. In Haiti, are there a number of people, I know a number of us have been to Haiti. I haven't personally, but I know some have. Are there a number of people that actually walk to church and come from quite a distance as far as walking distance is concerned? You think?
What do you mean by walking?
Well, I mean, well, I suppose they
You
could,
say more than 5 miles?
yeah, let's see.
One foot in front of the other.
Is it,
Well, how do they normally get there?
generally speaking, between Campesia and the first, that would be about the second village where we're building the church, that's about 6 to 7 miles. So they could go to Campesia or they could go to this, and that's sort of how the whole country's laid out. It's about, sometimes you can't even tell where the village ends and begins.
Really? Oh,
But you're still looking at 2 to 4 miles as you're traveling through this.
all right. So how do they normally? Huh?
You walk 2 to 4 miles per hour.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do they normally get there? Do they walk or do they walk?
There's just,
Okay,
pardon me.
that's what I was thinking.
We know what the tap taxi thing is, and they are out in the country, but that takes money.
Yeah,
Even that doesn't cost very much, but it takes money.
sure, which they don't have very little of, yes. Okay. So anyway, Hal's point is a good one though. Today, things have evolved to the point where we are a whole lot closer together because of our capabilities of being able to travel, as opposed to just walking somewhere. All right,
True, too. One thing that you want to think about is, too, that when we're in this building, the people outside in the world don't see us. They don't see how we conduct ourselves. They don't see how we act. But during his time, the temple, where you kind of get the feeling that he's talking about, they're having, how they view people at the temple, where they're worshiping. Like places like, this is talking about the city of Ephesus, that's where Timothy's at, right? So he's talking about things like the Temple of Diana, where he's looking at where their stuff is very public. Their worship is not hidden, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that are going on. So when he talks about conduct, the people usually associate what they see from what the Jews did, of course, how they worship, and of course, which was hypocritical,
Which is all-
of course.
yeah,
And then,
look at me type stuff.
yes, and then you got other temple of other gods that they're worshiping that people are seeing. And this it's important to think of, our conduct is very important and how the world sees us, because they did, this is not talking about a building, this is talking about God's church. So they probably didn't, if they had a building, it would be a shocker if it was probably open, right?
Yes.
And so it was open for everybody to see. And so their conduct was very much on display. So I think that's really a big part of what, his point. We're a little bit luckier where we, if we do our conduct, it's because we're at a workplace, or we're at, in a grocery store out in the open, but they aren't going to see what we do here unless they come to visit us. So very different in that way.
Okay.
You teach a lesson up here tonight, you're at the podium. They see you teaching that class, but they don't see us and how we're conducting ourselves, or what happens after this class, or how we greet each other before the class, or how we act, and, it's important how we handle our worship. Very little of it.
Good point, thank you. You look like you want to say something there, J.C. You have that, what am I going to say?
Well, we know that they met in homes in early churches,
Right,
that were small churches.
yeah.
But I'm going to differ with Tom just a little bit on one of his points. We, just as, Noah built the ark, he condemned the world by his obedience. Our neighbors know that our car is gone every Sunday morning, and they know we go to church, and they know that's why the car's gone. If the car's there, they know there's something wrong. That's how we preach to the world. It's by our conduct in public, and that draws attention to the church. And we do have visitors that come and visit to see what's going on here just because they recognize our conduct in public.
True, true. So I see actually both comments actually kind of fit. I see what you're saying, and I see what Tom's saying. And I think it both kind of blend together in the long run. Because people do keep an eye on us, there's no doubt about it. And they do expect certain things out of us that they don't expect out of other people. You realize that, right? Especially if they know what you are and what you stand for. And you don't have to mess up very badly before you've got somebody there tapping you on the shoulder and say, why are you doing that? You know, it doesn't have to be a brother or sister, you know, or they say, well, I thought you were this, you know, and then they make some comment, and all of a sudden you feel guilty. You realize you've done or said something that has carried farther than what you should have. Trust me, I know that. I've been there. And sometimes it takes a sudden jolt to reality to bring you back to realize what you actually did. So that's... Anyway, let's move on. That's good. I appreciate that. The comments are good. All right. Oh, staggering job description. We can't forget that. All right. Nothing can be of greater importance. We can't forget that either. I forgot them, but you don't want to forget them. All right. They're on there. It's just that I can't see them from here. You know, the eyesight thing. Okay. There we go. I wanted to bring up, you brought up, Crystal, about a sense of family. Okay, we're talking about what a small church has to offer us, that sometimes larger congregations don't have to offer, or in a varying degree in its own way. Now, here's what the Jeff man has to say. See if you agree with this. A small church is one where almost everyone knows each other. And you think so? You ever walked into a place that's filled and you're looking around for a friendly face and you can't find one? Somebody, I mean, they're probably all friendly in their own way, but you don't know anybody. Doesn't it sometimes make you feel like you're in the wrong place at the wrong time? You know, because you don't know someone. But we do. Everybody sitting here tonight, I believe anyway, knows everybody here to some degree. You may not know everything about them, but at least you're aware. Even when we don't remember their names, we remember their face. Have a visitor come in, you say, I can't remember your name, but I know I've seen you before. Right? Ever happened? You know what I hate? And this is where I'm talking now. What I hate is when I go someplace, like to a store or something like that, and somebody comes up and starts talking to you like they're your best friend. You know, how you been? You know, how's this? How's that? You know, what's going on? And you're there in your mind. You're thinking, oh man, what place this person? Oh, I hate that when it happens. And they act like, and they call you by name. They do everything. Is that just me? No. It is? No. What's not?
Andy Griffith too.
But you know what I'm talking about. Okay? Have you ever said this, I can't remember your name, but I know your face? Yeah, I say it all the time, because I mean it. Okay, granted, I probably know everyone's name here, I think. What's your name? Trouble. Yes, see, I knew that.
Well, I thought you were pointing to Patty.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying? We do know each other. Because, now, let's just say, we're in a congregation of thousands of people. And your chances of knowing everyone aren't nearly as great as they are when you're small. Now, some might say, well, that's not really an advantage. Well, but it is really, because it gives you a sense of familiarity. Does that sound a word? Or was I like Bruce and made that one up? I think it sounded good. All right? Okay. Thanks for sitting up front, Bruce. You make a good target.
There's nobody around here, but
I thought maybe you came up here to save me just in case things went bad. All right. He says here, wait. It's easier to feel like family. Huh? Wait a minute. Oh, yeah. Everyone should know each other, and it's easier to feel like a family. It's one where you can develop relationships with one another, a small congregation I'm talking about. In 1 Timothy verse 5, 1 and 2, that's what it says here. Do not sharply rebuke an older man, but rather appeal to him as a father, to the younger men as brothers, the older women as mothers, and the younger women as sisters, all in purity. The idea is that it gives us a chance to familiarize ourselves. Do you have someone in mind that you would consider a fatherly figure or a motherly figure? I'm talking other than your own, okay? Where there are somebody that has developed in you a sense that they are like family to you. And they are family. They're like your father, they're like your mother, they're like somebody who you can go to and talk to. You can sit down with them, you have a conversation you can relate to. If you don't know anybody, it makes it more difficult. It really does. Yes?
I want to make a comment about the smaller churches, also how the advantage it is to belong to a smaller church. Because I've done both. I went to a big church and this one, and weighed the two. And growing up and thinking, I like to be a part of a really big church because they have clinics and they have schools, and well, I became a part of that when I was a baby and went every other week to a big church just to support him and, have study. And every other week there were different people at the door, brothers, and every other week for 2 years they always said, fill out a visitor's card. They had no clue who I was.
They had no idea you've been there forever.
So it was
Well, not forever.
disjointed in that, where you just couldn't never got a relationship with people. And one of the things that he said is how supportive this church was, because what really impressed him, when I moved, so many people showed up that they didn't have enough stuff to do. And I remember Jeffrey Roy mowing my lawn, and he was like, who does that at a church? So it was a big impression on how close we were from a smaller church point of view, as opposed to big one.
We try very hard to take care of one another in a lot of different ways. Roofs, you name it. There's a shovel and snow, whatever it takes. Yes. Thank you, by the way.
One of the things that you need to keep in mind is that a lot of large churches have programs specifically to emulate small churches. They have small groups where you get to know a compact group of people, where you start to develop friendships. And so there's sometimes being a large church means that there's going to be things that are in place to emulate what you automatically get in a smaller church.
It's interesting that they do that, though, isn't it? There's a point to that. It goes to show you how important more compactness sometimes and how it affects us. Oh, wow, we got hands all over the place. Crystal first, yeah.
I think it's really important too. I think it's, and I have to say I've not ever really been a part of a really large church. Maybe
Well,
medium-sized, but
neither of us.
mostly small.
That's right.
But I would think it would be much more difficult in a larger church to get involved in multi-generational interaction. You've got your groups for youth, you've got, the young marrieds, the middle-aged, the older people, and there's enough people in each group where you could probably spend most of your time doing things with just that group. Whereas in a smaller church, you interact more like a family because you've got the multi-generational thing, and I think that's a plus.
Yes, I agree. And that is something we will be addressing as we move forward here. Go ahead, LaKenda.
And I was just going to end, that it doesn't matter about the schools or whatever the churches have, as long as we know each other, and we do here, so.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, well, let's move on. There we go.
Could you click that, make it larger?
I wish. Okay. One thing, another benefit of a small congregation, other than the fact that we are a close-knit family, okay, is that we have greater opportunities to grow, which is basically kind of where we've been headed on our discussion. So what has happened is we have morphed into what actually is developing into the discussion that we want to talk about. Meaning that, and of course we go back to the body thing again, Ephesians, that was already mentioned about everything put together creates a church. All right, here's what he says. The roles to fulfill are not that much different between large and small churches. And this is talking about worship basically, but not totally. Roles such as serving in public worship, Bible class, etc. Whether large or small, the number of teachers, preachers, song leaders, etc. is about the same. Now, let's take a small congregation, such as us. We have a reasonable amount of song leaders. I remember back in the day when Bruce and I were the only two that ever led singing. And boy, I feel sorry for you people. But nevertheless, well, think about it. Nowadays, look at the variety we have. And we have people that look at their lists totally different and they present them in different ways and they, well, this is great. And it gives other people an opportunity that if they don't always want to be up there leading singing, an opportunity to sing from back there. Okay? And that is worth its weight in gold. Look at preachers. Okay? Now we have Jeff, sure, and Jeff does a great job. But I'm going to tell you, that sermon we heard this morning was top of the line, as far as I was concerned. Oh, there you are. You are here. All right, well, I'm not going to take it back. Sorry. I thought that was... I thought that was good. I told him that this morning. It was something I found understandable, which of course is something Jeff does. He makes his messages understandable. Now, believe it or not, we have had, and I'm sure you will, but we have had preachers here that you almost had to carry a thesaurus around to figure out what they were talking about. You probably know what I'm talking about. All right. And the thing of it is you went about saying, well, I wonder what that was all about. You know, you don't want people, when you get a chance to talk to them, teach them, preach, whatever it is, you don't want them wondering, well, I wonder what he said, you know. And somehow that doesn't serve a very good purpose. People have got to understand your message. If they don't do that, I'm not saying you waste your time, but you really haven't been wise in that. So the roles, we, as a small congregation, we still have the same amount of roles to fill. Now, granted, we'll have somebody who will lead the table, okay, like Darryl did this morning, he did a good job. Okay, we have 4 people that help pass. Okay, in a big congregation, you're probably going to have a whole bunch of people. Like when we go down to Lads of Leaders, you know, there'll be, I don't know, there'll be a bunch of kids go around passing stuff out because there's a whole bunch of people. You know, but they still only have one song leader. They still only have one person preaching. Well, in that case, they actually bring up the ones that have done well in speaking, and they'll have them speak. They'll have a few minutes to speak each. But as a rule, that's the way it works. So the thing of it is, the ratio, as what he says here, the ratio of roles to members is usually much greater in small churches. You have greater opportunities and more opportunities to be able to advance yourself and to be able to develop yourself spiritually because you have the opportunities. Big congregation, you might just fit in here and there and everywhere. You know? Most Sunday mornings I walk in here thinking, well, if I'm not on the list, if I'm not on the privilege list, thinking, more than likely they'll tap me on the shoulder somewhere along the line and say, hey, can you do this, that, or the other thing? You know what I'm saying? Now, the ratio of roles to members is usually much greater in small churches simply because we don't have a large pool of members to choose from. And it pushes the people involved to become more involved. And it gives us, because of that, the greater opportunity to grow. Okay?
Right.
Yes.
And individually, it's called growth as well.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. I'm not exactly sure where this goes from here. Hang on. Okay, yeah, I think next. Okay. More than likely, you'll be used in a small church, okay? And he has 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and 7 up here, what that says. But the chances are, if you're in a small congregation, you're going to be needed. Find your niche. Find what you can do. Be willing to do it when asked to do it. Granted, there are some people who will not do certain things. And that's okay. That is okay. And you know why? Because there's other things you can do. There is never, it's never a one-size-fits-all situation. Now, oftentimes when you're an elder, you're expected to be able to do about everything, but it doesn't matter. Even as an elder, some things you do better than others. I don't care what it is. Whether it's visiting in the hospitals or whether it's whatever it might be. The fact is you're willing to do it and you have more opportunities to do it. Okay? Smaller churches use those willing to serve more frequently, often out of necessity, which is what I was talking about. But it can also be by design, meaning that you look for opportunities to get other people involved. And you have a greater opportunity to do that when you're in a small congregation, to try to get other people involved. Because sometimes people need encouragement. Sometimes they just need that little extra push, the encouragement to keep them, move them forward, get them off the inertia, get them off of that fact that, they don't want to be in action, because that's what inertia is. It's the opposite of action, So, Hal, you got a finger. No,
I do.
I'm thinking.
One of the things that helps is most smaller congregations actually have a plan to get people involved. They know that they have to keep getting people involved to do other things. And most small congregations, when it comes to those leading worship and teaching, they have a plan for everybody to help them get involved.
Yes, exactly. Good idea. Yeah, Jeff.
I can say, while I don't disagree with anything that we're talking about, I think that something that always concerns me when a conversation like this comes up is the fear that somehow we might use this as an excuse not to reach out to others and not want to grow, understanding that that is what we're supposed to do, at least from the teaching standpoint.
Right.
I take it real personally because when in Dubuque, we went from 35 to 100 in a year, and the elder decided that we were growing too fast, and that he just kind of liked a small congregation, and they got rid of the preachers.
That's just wrong.
I
Think
just
like
have
that. Yeah.
So I'm overreacting to thoughts with this type of thing, I understand that, but it was a real personal thing to me because I was so involved with what we were doing to get to that point.
Yes.
And to have it, then I moved to Woodstock and taught, but then came back and he was gone. By the time he came back, the congregation was back down in the 30s, the 40s, and, it's technically not even there really anymore.
Well,
So that's why I'm saying, I think it's important to make sure that while there are all these benefits, I do not disagree with that whatsoever. And I think a lot of those benefits apply as the church grows too, if we don't lose our focus on what we're supposed to be about, that we don't use that as an excuse not to reach out and try to grow this.
And if we're given enough time, we're running out, I just realized what time it is, we will pursue that, because that is an important point to realize. That does not give us a reason to stagnate. Stay small just because you are small, and I like it that way, and that is a good point. We hadn't gotten there yet, but we will.
Sorry.
No, that's all right, because if we don't get there, it means we did.
It was just because I
No,
just can't tell you how much I miss that.
Yeah.
That year was just so important to me,
Yeah,
and I just want that back so bad.
Sure.
And I know, there's lots of things that happen in our lives that we want to recreate, and they just won't be recreated again.
yeah, and you're absolutely right.
But it's just something I felt really bad about because of what happened.
Yeah, and it should never be that way. Should never be that way, you're absolutely correct. Anyway, more than likely you'll be missed in a small church. And I think the reasons for that are probably pretty obvious. The fact is, it goes back to the fact that we know each other. And when you're just one fish in a sea, you know, you can't know everybody. And not that there's anything wrong with that, other than the fact that it does limit our effectiveness to some degree. And some people will use that as an opportunity to hide. See, now that's another thing, okay? Well, look into talk about it. Every time she came in, they handed her visitor card, say, fill this out. Well,
You must have never laughed there, right? Because they would have not forgot you.
yes, I'm the guy, I'm the one with the laugh. Yeah, they say, oh, it's you. All right. Sense of family in all members. Providing opportunities for spiritual fellowship. And we're just going to keep rolling along here. Individually, providing opportunities for hospitality, which of course is where Jeff comes in. The hospitality thing, the getting people to know each other, associate with one another, have games, meals, whatever it takes, you know, get together. It's important. Trip to the Pines, whatever it might be, card parties, you know. Don't limit it to your physical family to the exclusion of the church family. Remember, oftentimes we get together with our own personal families. Don't forget your church family. All right? That's all that's saying. Hang on a second. I got to get back on track here, if there was a track. I think there was. Okay. Oh, man, I noticed. Catch this one. Don't feel like the preacher is shirking his responsibilities when he opens up the pulpit. You threw that one in there. Okay. I'm not saying that. He's saying it. But no, that's no, he can do that. But yeah, that's right. That's part of the reason he allows young men to come up and speak, is to develop them. Okay? And of course, this is about working with the people, training those, utilizing those who are willing to improve. Okay? All right? How about this? If I can. Watch for stagnation. And this is where you come in, Jeff. Not that you're stagnant. I'm saying that we are referring to churches that become stagnant because they like things the way they are. And that is something that has to be dealt with. It should always be in our nature, because of what we are and who we are, to want to procreate, to want to become more. We want people to be more like us. We're trying to bring them in. We want them to be like Christ. That's why you do it. You don't say, oh, I've got all I need. Be satisfied. Okay? Is that right? Makes sense, doesn't it? All right. So Jeff's point is a good one, and that's why I knew we would get there. But and I would wish we had a little more time to talk about that. But it's important for us to realize that it's easy to stay small. And of course, he puts up a scripture here in Luke where it talks about that, where the tendency is to want, if you find something you're comfortable with, stick with it. But it doesn't work that way. The church was established on the day of Pentecost, and how many people responded? How many? 3,000. Oh, wow. That went right to the big church thing right away, didn't it? But what did they do? They broke up into smaller groups, ended up meeting in homes, all this kind of thing. So they were all the same. It's the same thing nowadays. We're part of the universal church. We're part of the church worldwide, whatever the church is. Wherever those who have done what they're supposed to do to become Christian and become Christian, we're all brothers and sisters. We're all related. We're all together. but we're not all in the same place. And that's where the smallness and the big one comes into play. All right? The Lord expects growth. He does not want us to stay complacent with where we're at and what we're doing. You always need to be in the process of becoming something else other than what you are. Get that point. It's very important. Okay. He presented another parable to them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed which a man took and sowed in the field, and this is smaller than all the other seeds, but when it's full grown, it is larger than the garden plants, becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and nest in its branches. Here we go back to the branches again, and this is where we're going to finish up. The birds come, nest in their branches, they find solace there. They can stay there all night, they find protection, they have a way to relate. Without that branch being there, there is no place to go. And that's what the church is. It's a branch. Whether we're a small branch, large branch, doesn't matter. We are part of the main tree. And that makes us important. Very important. All right? And am I done? Oh, there we are. All right. Here's how he finishes up, and I agree. Again, there are advantages to different sizes. My point has not been to suggest one size is superior to another. My purpose has been to ensure we do not let smallness become a hindrance. We don't allow it to detract us from doing what we need to do. But by the same token, we don't become so complacent in being small and insignificant that we want that to become a way of life. We constantly need to be growing. As a small congregation, we need to focus on our strengths. That leads us to grow, and that's what we've been talking about. How it's so possible, even in a small congregation, to develop and to grow even more so than in a large one. Because if we do, what's going to happen? We will stagnate. When you stagnate, you become a branch in Ron's yard. You die. And then he has to pick you up and get rid of you. You don't want that. Or, okay, you get the point. Okay. So don't stagnate. Keep moving forward. If you're small, nothing wrong with that. Work with that. Develop that. Use the smallness for a chance to develop yourself. And someday, Lord willing, we too will be bigger. And that's where it's at, brethren. The fact that we can become bigger, and we should want to be. So, all right? I'm going to look at it this way. We're a congregation, let's say 100 people. We could double in size, and we still be considered small. By the statistics we talked about earlier. So you see, it's a relative thing. It really is. Anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Sorry for running over a few minutes. Appreciate the comments. Good stuff. Thank you.